Brother in the lake, too. That's why he's gone. The birthday cake sat forgotten as my father-in-law's face went white. I'm Melinda, and what happened at my son's 10th birthday party didn't just ruin a celebration, it exposed a murder everyone had believed was an accident. But let me back up for just a moment, because you need to understand the people in this story to grasp why those words changed everything. My son Brody had just turned 10 that day. He's got his father's sandy hair and gentle nature, the kind of kid who rescues worms from sidewalks after rain. Ever since his dad died 2 years ago, Brody had developed a fear of water that no amount of coaxing could cure. Swimming lessons were out of the question. Even bath time had become a negotiation. Then there's my daughter Piper, 7 years old with dark curls and eyes that see everything. She'd always been chatty, the child who narrated her every thought, until Tommy died. After that, she became selective about when she spoke, especially around certain people. I thought it was grief. I was wrong. Earl Hutchins, my father-in-law, stood 6'2" with hands rough from 40 years working at a steel factory before becoming a supervisor. He was the type who believed tears were weakness and swimming was a survival skill every child should master by age 5. He'd raised Tommy and his younger brother Nathan with an iron fist and a sharp tongue. Nathan had drowned at age 4, a tragedy that supposedly softened Earl. Another lie we all believed. My mother-in-law, Dolly, was Earl's opposite in every way, soft-spoken where he was loud, gentle where he was harsh. She'd spent 43 years making excuses for his temper, smoothing over his rough edges with cookies and kind words. That's just Earl's way, she'd say when he'd make Brody cry with his criticism. My sister Roxanne had driven 3 hours to help with the party. She's a nurse, 4 years older than me, and had never trusted Earl. Something's off about Tommy's accident, she'd told me more than once. Experienced swimmers don't just fall out of boats and drown. But I'd pushed away her suspicions, unable to process losing Tommy to anything other than terrible luck. Tommy would have been 36 now. He was the kind of father who taught Brody card tricks and had tea parties with Piper, wearing a plastic tiara without complaint. He'd inherited his maternal grandfather's hardware business, bypassing Earl entirely, which had created tension I'd pretended not to notice. Tommy had been planning to teach Brody to swim that summer he died. Gentle and patient, he'd promised me, not like how my dad taught me. The morning of the party, our house buzzed with preparation. 30 guests were coming, mostly families from Brody's school and our relatives. I'd covered our suburban backyard with superhero decorations. The pool sparkled in the August sun, even though I knew Brody wouldn't go near it. I'd actually considered covering it, but decided that would make his fear the centerpiece of his special day. "Mom, what if Grandpa says something about me not swimming?" Brody had asked while we set up chairs. "I'll handle Grandpa," I promised, squeezing his shoulder. "This is your day, your rules." Piper helped me arrange cupcakes on the table, humming quietly. She'd picked out her favorite dress, the one with rainbows on it. "Is Grandpa Earl coming?" she'd asked, her voice small. "Yes, sweetheart, but Aunt Roxanne will be here too." She nodded, seeming to calculate something in her head. "Okay, Mommy." The first guests arrived at 2 o'clock. Kids immediately attacked the bounce house while parents gathered on the patio with drinks. Everything felt normal, even joyful. For the first time since Tommy's funeral, our house contained laughter. Earl and Dolly arrived at 2:30, Earl carrying a poorly wrapped gift that was obviously a fishing rod. My stomach tightened. Of all the tone-deaf presents to bring a boy whose father drowned on a fishing trip. But I smiled, hugged Dolly, and accepted Earl's rough pat on my shoulder. "House looks good, Melinda. Tommy would be happy to see it kept up." "Thank you, Earl." He surveyed the party, his eyes landing on the pool where kids were splashing. "Brody in there swimming? He's in the bounce house." Earl's jaw tightened, that look I'd seen so many times before. The one that preceded a lecture about weakness, about what makes a real man, about how his generation didn't coddle children. I braced myself for what was coming, never imagining it would end with police cars in my driveway and my daughter's terrible secret finally finding its voice. It was supposed to be Brody's first real birthday party since Tommy died 2 years ago. I'd spent weeks planning every detail, determined to make it perfect. The 3-tier cake had taken me 4 attempts to get right, each layer a different superhero theme. The bounce house cost more than I should have spent, but seeing Brody's face when the delivery truck arrived made it worth every penny. "Mom, do I have to go in the pool?" Brody had asked me that morning while we arranged plastic tables on the lawn. His brown eyes searched mine for reassurance. "Of course not, sweetheart. It's your party. You decide what you do and don't do." The truth cut deeper than his simple question. Brody hadn't been near water since his father's drowning at Lake Garrison. Tommy had gone fishing with Earl on what should have been an ordinary Saturday morning in June. Father and son bonding over base and beer, except only Earl came back. They said Tommy had stood up too fast, lost his balance, and hit his head on the boat's edge before falling into the deep water. Earl claimed he'd jumped in immediately, but couldn't find Tommy in the murky lake. By the time rescue divers arrived, it was too late. My sister Roxanne helped me string lights between trees, creating a canopy of stars for when evening came. "You sure you want Earl here?" she asked, wrapping wire around a branch. "After everything. He's Brody's grandfather. Whatever I think about Earl, I can't exclude him from his grandson's 10th birthday." Roxanne adjusted a sagging section of lights. "Tommy would understand if you did." "Maybe. But I'm trying to keep family together for the kids. They've lost enough." She nodded but didn't look convinced. Roxanne had been the one to pick me up from the hospital after I'd identified Tommy's body. She'd held me while I screamed in her car, unable to drive home to tell my children their father was never coming back. Since then, she'd watched Earl like a hawk at every family gathering, suspicious of his story but having no proof of anything sinister. The party started at 2 o'clock sharp. The Hendersons arrived first with their twin boys, followed by the Nguyens, the Petersons, and half of Brody's 4th grade class. Soon our backyard transformed into cheerful chaos. Kids bounced and screamed with delight, while parents clustered in conversation groups, cold drinks sweating in the Texas heat. I was refilling the lemonade pitcher when I spotted Piper sitting alone under the oak tree, watching the other children play. She'd been doing that more lately, observing rather than participating. The child psychologist said it was normal for grieving children to withdraw, but something about her watchfulness seemed different. Protective, almost. "Hey, baby girl," I said, sitting beside her on the grass. "Want to join the bounce house?" She shook her head, her rainbow dress spread around her like flower petals. "I'm watching for Grandpa Earl." "He'll be here soon. Are you excited to see him?" Piper picked at the grass. "Grandma Dolly makes good cookies." It wasn't an answer to my question, but I'd learned not to push. Piper would talk when she was ready. She always had before Tommy died. Now words seemed to cost her something, especially around certain people. Earl and Dolly arrived at 2:30, their silver sedan parking behind 3 minivans. Earl emerged first, standing tall in his pressed khakis and polo shirt, the same outfit he wore to every family function. Dolly followed with a covered dish that I knew contained her famous potato salad. "There's my big boy!" Earl's voice boomed across the yard as he spotted Brody climbing out of the bounce house. He strode over and ruffled Brody's sweaty hair. 10 years old! When I was 10, I was swimming across rivers and catching fish with my bare hands." Brody shrunk back slightly, his birthday crown tilting. "Thanks for coming, Grandpa." "Got you something special," Earl said, holding up the wrapped fishing rod like a trophy. "Time you learned to be a real outdoorsman like your old man." I saw Brody's face fall, but he managed a polite thank you. Dolly hugged him next, slipping a $20 bill into his pocket with a wink. "For whatever you really want," she whispered. The party continued smoothly for the next hour. We played Pin the Shield on Captain America, had a water balloon toss that stayed far from the pool, and sang Happy Birthday with 30 voices strong. Brody beamed as he blew out his candles, making a wish I suspected involved his father somehow being there. Everything shifted after the cake was served. The adults had settled into lawn chairs while kids ran off their sugar high. I was in the kitchen getting more napkins when I heard Earl's voice cutting through the party noise. That tone I recognized too well. The one that meant someone wasn't measuring up to his standards. Everything shifted after the cake. The kids were playing by the pool while adults chatted on the patio, and I was in the kitchen getting more drinks when I heard Earl's voice carrying over the party noise, with that edge I knew too well. "Boy needs to toughen up, Melinda. Can't be afraid of everything his whole life." I rushed outside to find Earl standing by the pool with Brody. My son was backing away, his superhero cape dragging on the concrete, his face pale despite the heat. A circle of children had stopped playing to watch, and several parents had turned in their chairs. "I don't want to swim, Grandpa. Mom said I don't have to." "Your mom's turning you soft. Your dad would have wanted you to be strong. Tommy was swimming by age 5, competing by 8. Look at you, 10 years old and scared of a swimming pool like a toddler." "Earl, please," I said, moving toward them quickly. "Let's not do this today." He turned to me, his face red and jaw clenched. "You're raising a coward. Tommy would be ashamed. The boy's father dies in water and now he won't even get in a pool? That's not healing. That's hiding." "Don't you dare." Roxanne stepped forward from where she'd been standing near the fence. "Don't you dare invoke Tommy's name to bully his son." Earl laughed, but it was harsh and mocking. "Bully? I'm trying to help the kid. You women always coddling, always protecting. That's why boys grow up weak these days. No backbone, no grit." The other parents were watching now with uncomfortable expressions. Jennifer Henderson had her phone out, probably texting her husband to get the kids and leave. But then Mark Nguyen started recording, sensing something was about to happen. Within seconds, 4 other phones appeared. Earl grabbed Brody's arm, his thick fingers wrapping around my son's thin wrist. "Just need a little push, that's all. Sink or swim, that's how we learned in my day. My father threw me off a dock when I was 6. Best thing he ever did for me." "Grandpa, no!" Brody cried out, trying to pull away. "Please, I can't swim. I don't want to." "That's the point. You'll learn real quick when you have to. Fear is all in your head, boy. Your dad understood that. Well, mostly understood it." Something about the way he said that last part made my blood run cold. There was contempt in his voice, the same tone he'd used when Tommy had announced he was taking over the hardware store instead of selling it to the chain that Earl had mysteriously been pushing. "Let go of my son, Earl, now." "Or what? You'll coddle him more. Look around, Melinda. All these kids swimming except yours. It's embarrassing. Tommy would have fixed this by now if he hadn't been so damn careless on that boat." "Stop it!" Piper suddenly screamed from across the patio. Everyone turned to look at her. She was standing rigid, her small fists clenched. "Stop being mean to Brody." "Piper, honey, go inside," Dolly said nervously, moving toward her granddaughter. "No, he's always mean, always saying bad things about Daddy and being mean to Brody and—" Before anyone could stop him, Earl shoved Brody hard into the deep end. My son hit the water with a splash, immediately panicking, thrashing wildly, his mouth opening in a scream that filled with water. He went under, came up gasping, went under again. "Learn to swim or drown," Earl shouted at the struggling boy, then quieter but still audible to those of us close enough. "Like your mother should have." I dove in fully clothed without thinking, my sundress billowing around me as I swam to my drowning son. Brody was in full panic, his arms flailing, eyes wide with terror. I grabbed him under his arms and kicked hard toward the edge, where 3 fathers were already kneeling to help pull us out. Brody clung to me, coughing and sobbing, his entire body shaking. "What is wrong with you?" I screamed at Earl, holding my traumatized son. "Boy needed to face his fears," Earl defended, though his voice had lost some of its conviction as he saw the horrified faces around him. "I was right there. Nothing would have happened. I would have jumped in if he really needed help." "Like you jumped in for Tommy?" Roxanne shot back, her phone now recording everything. The party had gone dead silent except for the sound of phone cameras capturing the scene and Brody's ragged breathing against my soaked shoulder. Water dripped from my hair onto the hot concrete, each drop seeming to echo in the terrible quiet. I wrapped Brody in a towel, holding him as he shook against me, his tears mixing with the pool water still dripping from his hair. The other parents were murmuring among themselves, some already gathering their children and heading toward the gate. Jennifer Henderson picked up her twins without a word, shooting Earl a look of pure disgust. Mark Nguyen kept his phone trained on us, documenting everything. That's when I noticed Piper. She was standing perfectly still by the dessert table, staring at Earl with an expression I'd never seen on her young face before. It wasn't fear or sadness. It was pure, concentrated rage, the kind that seemed too large for her small body to contain. "You're a bad man," she said quietly, but her voice carried across the silent yard. "Now, Piper, honey, Dolly tried to intervene, walking toward her with open arms. Grandpa was just trying to help. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes when they're trying to teach important lessons. "No!" Piper screamed, backing away from her grandmother. "He's bad. He pushes people. He pushed Brody just like he pushed them." "Piper, sweetheart, come here," I called to her, still holding Brody, who had his face buried in my wet shoulder. But she was building up to something, her whole body trembling with the effort of holding it in. Earl laughed nervously, adjusting his polo shirt that had come untucked during the struggle. "Kids and their imaginations, right? Come on, everyone's being too sensitive. The boy is fine. Look, he's breathing, he's okay. This is how children learn. A little fear never killed anyone." "Get out," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "Get out of my house right now." "Melinda, you're overreacting. This is what's wrong with your parenting. Too emotional, too protective. The boy needs a firm hand, a male influence who isn't afraid to push him." I said, "Get out." "We should go," Dolly said quietly, tugging on Earl's arm. "Let everyone calm down." "I'm not going anywhere," Earl said, planting his feet. "This is my grandson's birthday party. I have every right to be here. If anyone should leave, it's all these strangers with their damn phones out making a big deal out of nothing." Roxanne stepped forward. "I'm calling the police. What you did was assault." "Assault?" Earl scoffed. "Teaching a boy to swim is assault now. This country's gone soft. No wonder kids today can't handle anything." As people continued filing out, some stopping to whisper their sympathy to me, Piper suddenly ran to the middle of the patio. She climbed onto a chair so everyone could see her. "I need to tell the truth," she screamed at the top of her lungs. Everyone stopped moving. Even the departing families paused at the gate. "Piper, what truth, baby?" I asked, my heart pounding with sudden dread. "About what happened to Daddy. About what Grandpa did." Earl's face went from red to pale in an instant. "The child doesn't know what she's saying. She's upset, confused. Dolly, take her inside." "Don't touch her," Roxanne warned, moving to stand between Earl and Piper. "I was there," Piper said, her voice shaking but determined. "I was on the boat when Daddy died. I saw everything." The yard went so quiet I could hear the pool filter humming. My legs felt weak. I set Brody down on a chair, making sure he was wrapped in towels, then walked slowly toward my daughter. "Piper, what do you mean you were there? You were at Emma's sleepover that day." "Daddy picked me up early," she said, tears starting to stream down her face. "Emma threw up and her mom called Daddy. He said we could surprise Grandpa at the lake. I was going to hide in the boat cabin and jump out, but I fell asleep on the little bed in there." My mind was racing. The boat did have a small cabin with a bunk. Tommy sometimes napped there during long fishing days. It would have been the perfect hiding spot for a 5-year-old. "She's making this up," Earl said, but his voice had lost all its earlier authority. "Kids create false memories all the time. She's mixing up different days, different trips." "I woke up when you were yelling," Piper continued, looking directly at her grandfather. "You were so mad, madder than I ever saw you. Daddy was trying to make you stop yelling, but you wouldn't stop." "What were they yelling about, sweetheart?" Roxanne asked gently, her phone still recording. Piper took a shaky breath. "Money. The store. Grandpa said Daddy stole what should have been his. He said Daddy was weak just like Mommy. He said the family business should have been his to sell, not Daddy's to keep." The silence was deafening. Earl's face had gone from pale to ghostly white, his mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. Dolly gasped, covering her mouth with both hands, her eyes darting between her husband and granddaughter. "Daddy said, 'Dad, let's just go back,'" Piper continued, her small voice carrying across the frozen yard. "He said it nice, like he always talked, but Grandpa got madder. He said Daddy was a disappointment, just like Nathan." Nathan. Tommy's younger brother who had drowned at age 4 in a public pool 25 years ago. The family tragedy we never discussed. Then Grandpa pushed him, hard, with both hands on Daddy's back. Daddy tried to grab the boat side, but his head hit the metal part. There was a bad sound. Then he fell in the water. "She's lying," Earl shouted, his voice cracking. "The kid's making it up. She wasn't there. Tell them, Dolly. Tell them about the sleepover." Dolly was crying now, shaking her head slowly. "Oh, God, Earl. Oh, my God." I tried to scream, but I was too scared. Piper sobbed. Daddy didn't come back up. I could see him in the water through the little window, sinking down and down. Grandpa waited and waited. He looked over the side for a long time. Then he messed up his clothes and pushed some stuff off the boat. Then he called for help on the radio. Why didn't you say anything? Dolly whispered, tears streaming down her face. Baby, why didn't you tell us? Grandpa told everyone Daddy fell by himself. The police believed him. Everyone believed him. I thought if I told, he'd push me too. Or Mommy, or Brody. Piper was crying harder now. I stayed quiet to keep us safe. But today when he pushed Brody, I knew he would keep hurting people, just like he hurt Daddy and baby Nathan. What about Nathan? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. I heard Daddy say it that day. Right before Grandpa pushed him, Daddy said, "You did the same thing to Nathan. I know what you did at the pool." The remaining party guests stood frozen. Mark Nguyen had moved closer, his phone capturing every word. 2 other parents were also recording. In the distance, I could hear sirens approaching. "Someone called the police," Jennifer Henderson said from the gate. "I called them when he pushed Brody in the pool." Earl started backing toward the side gate. "This is insane. You're all insane. Believing the fantasies of a confused child. She's obviously traumatized and creating false memories." "Then you won't mind talking to the police," Roxanne said, moving to block his path. "Piper," I knelt in front of my daughter, holding her small hands in mine. "Are you absolutely sure about what you saw? This is very, very important." She nodded, meeting my eyes with a clarity that broke my heart. "Daddy's fishing pole, the blue one. It fell in the water when Grandpa pushed him. Daddy was wearing his lucky green hat, the one with the fish on it. Grandpa threw it in the water after to make it look like it fell off. The radio lady asked about other boats nearby. Grandpa said no, but there was a red boat far away with a yellow flag. Details. Specific details no 7-year-old could fabricate. The blue fishing pole had never been recovered. Tommy's lucky hat was found floating, and the police report mentioned they'd searched for other boats but found none, based on Earl's testimony. "Earl," Dolly's voice was strange, hollow, "tell me she's wrong. Look me in the eye and tell me you didn't kill our son." Earl turned to his wife of 43 years. For a moment, his mask slipped completely. The rage, the entitlement, the lifetime of barely controlled violence showed through. "He was weak," Earl said quietly, "just like his mother, just like Nathan, weak and soft and disappointing. The business should have been mine to sell. $2 million from that development company, gone because Tommy wanted to play shopkeeper." The confession hung in the air like poison. Dolly made a sound like a wounded animal and collapsed into a chair. Brody had started crying again, understanding enough to know his grandfather had just admitted to killing his father. "And Nathan?" I asked, needing to know it all. Earl's jaw tightened. Another accident. Another weak boy who couldn't swim when it mattered. The police cars pulled into our driveway, their sirens cutting off abruptly. 2 officers came through the gate, taking in the scene. The wet child wrapped in towels, the crying children, the phones recording everything, and Earl standing in the center, looking like a cornered animal. "We got a call about an assault," the first officer said. "It's more than that," Roxanne said, holding up her phone. "Much more. We have a confession to murder." The police arrived within minutes, and 3 separate party guests had called 911. Earl tried to leave, but 2 fathers, Mark Nguyen and David Peterson, blocked his way. They didn't touch him, just stood there like walls while we waited for the officers to come through the gate. "We got a call about an assault," the first officer said, looking at the scene before him. "It's become much more than that," Roxanne said, holding up her phone. "We have a confession to murder, multiple murders. The investigation that followed turned our lives inside out, but it also brought justice we never knew we needed." Piper had to undergo gentle questioning by child psychologists who specialized in trauma. They confirmed her story showed no signs of coaching or fabrication. She knew details about the boat that had never been released, the color of the cushions in the cabin, the broken latch on the storage compartment, even what snacks Tommy had packed that day. Things only an eyewitness would know. The case was reopened immediately. When investigators re-examined Tommy's body, they found evidence they'd missed before, assuming it was an accident. The bruising on Tommy's back matched the pattern of two hands pushing forcefully. There were defensive wounds on his palms that had been attributed to hitting the boat. Earl's DNA was found under Tommy's fingernails, suggesting Tommy had tried to grab his father's arms as he was pushed. 3 months later, during the investigation into Nathan's death, a woman named Patricia Morse came forward. She'd been 12 years old at the public pool that day 25 years ago. She'd seen Earl hold Nathan under the water during what looked like a swimming lesson, keeping him down just a few seconds too long. When the boy stopped moving, Earl had pulled him up and started screaming for help. Patricia had been too young and scared to speak up, but she'd never forgotten. She'd followed the news about Tommy's case and couldn't stay silent anymore. Earl was charged with 2 counts of murder. During the trial, the prosecution presented evidence of his financial motivations. Tommy had refused to sell the hardware store to a development company that would have netted Earl a hefty finder's fee. The company had been pressuring Earl for months, and he'd already spent money he didn't have, anticipating the sale. Earl got life in prison without the possibility of parole. During his sentencing, he showed no remorse, still insisting that his sons had been disappointments who couldn't live up to his standards. The judge called him a narcissist who valued control and money over his own children's lives. Dolly divorced him before the trial ended. She moved to Oregon to live with her sister, unable to face the community where everyone knew her husband was a murderer. She sends cards on the kids' birthdays, always with the same message: "I'm sorry I didn't see it. I'm sorry I didn't protect you." We don't see her, but I've forgiven her. Some truths are too terrible to see when they're living in your own house. Brody eventually learned to swim. Roxanne found him a therapist who specialized in aqua therapy for trauma survivors. It took a year, but he conquered his fear. He's 12 now and swims competitively for his middle school team. He wears his dad's old team cap from high school to every meet. Last month, he won his first gold medal in freestyle. Piper underwent 2 years of counseling to process what she'd witnessed and carried alone. The therapist said she'd been living with severe PTSD, manifesting as selective mutism around her grandfather. Her brave moment at the party had finally freed her voice from the prison of that terrible secret. She's 9 now, confident and strong, and wants to be a prosecutor when she grows up. "Someone needs to speak for the people who can't," she told me last week. The birthday party videos went viral with headlines like "7-year-old girl exposes grandfather as killer at pool party" and "the birthday party that solved a murder." But for us, it wasn't about the sensation or the millions of views. It was about justice for Tommy and Nathan and about learning that silence in the face of evil becomes its own kind of drowning. Last week, we visited Tommy's grave together on what would have been his 38th birthday. Brody placed his swimming medal on the headstone. Piper left a drawing of our family, including Tommy, watching over us from a cloud with Uncle Nathan beside him. "Daddy would be proud of you both," I told them. "He is proud," Piper said with the certainty only children can possess. "He told me in my dream last night. He said thank you for being brave. He said Nathan thanks me too." Sometimes the smallest voices carry the biggest truths. My 7-year-old daughter solved 2 murders that day, standing in her rainbow swimsuit, finding courage when it mattered most. Earl thought he could silence our family with fear. He never counted on a little girl's love for her brother being stronger than her terror. If you found this story compelling, please like this video and share it with others. Your comments mean everything to us as we share these important stories. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories that remind us how courage can come from the most unexpected places.